Hello and welcome back to part two of the interview with Sloot and Ian Watcher Hazakostas. Let's dive right back in, shall we?
That you were very passionate about talking about this because this has been the hot topic in the community right now. Covenant player power locking. A lot of people feel it's an issue to lock a pretty substantial amount of player power behind Covenant choice and the associated difficulty with swapping to a different Covenant. Because there is I would say, big enough part of the player base that wants to be able to go, hey, I'm going to Mythic Plus, we should take Kyrian. Hey, I'm going into Raid now, I want Night Fae. And it seems like the only counter appeal to that is kind of loyalty and lore. And sometimes the counter argument is also kind of, oh, that's just the 1% that wants to do that. But I think with the way kind of gaming is developed, a lot of people that are more casual in nature still look up to the higher end players, or they just Google, hey, what's best, because I want my character still be the best, even if I'm maybe not the best player or whatever. So what kind of, how have you guys taken this feedback that is really controversial right now into potentially changing or standing your ground on this?
So yeah, this is a super hot topic not just in the community, but on the team. It's probably the number one thing that we're discussing since some of our initial blogs went up, and that's going to continue for weeks to come. I think a couple of broad thoughts, and then I'll get into some specifics. And I saw some initial discussion on Reddit and elsewhere that was asking or framing this as like, well, covenants are this cosmetic feature. Why are you guys sticking power into a cosmetic feature? That maybe take a step back and wonder if we've done a poor job of framing what the feature is at BlizzCon and elsewhere. And I think covenants we see as a gameplay mainstay. It's story-wise, dozens of quests, different paths, but also these abilities, soulbinds that you'll have 3 of per covenant with their own traits and trees of traits that you'll unlock. Down the road, potentially covenant-specific legendaries that can modify covenant abilities, utility, different perks that you'll earn through your sanctum, and more, including cosmetic things like cool mounts, armor, transmog, back attachments, etc. But that is the entire package. And so, first off, our hope is, I think we didn't do the greatest job of presenting the abilities side by side in the blog. Like, I can understand, you open the blog, you scroll down, you go to Warlock, and you're looking across the row. It looks like a talent row. You're like, okay, which one of these 4 things do I want? I can change my talents, why don't you let me change these? But you're actually choosing among a much larger package that we hope in the long run we have enough knobs and tools to balance and fine-tune so that while, yes, there may be one covenant that is better for boss 3 in the raid if you're a rogue, the answer for boss 6 will be a different one. And the answer for one dungeon or one affix will be different from the other. But the other part of this is, how big are those differences? Right? Like, do you technically, money aside, for gold, you can race change if you want to. I don't know that I've ever, in MDI, people will min-max their races. I don't know that I've ever seen someone apply to and get declined for a pug because they were the wrong race for their given class, or that we've seen people change from one race to the other. Because while those differences exist, they're relatively smaller. Now, philosophy-wise, the thing that we're trying to defend here and trying to hold out for, frankly, is just meaningful choice. It's that core RPG sense of identity. And we've heard feedback from players, and I think that which make good points over the years, who ask the question of like, is WoW even an RPG anymore? What about my character customization? What about my identity? What about my agency? Like every game you've ever played, probably in the genre, going back 20 years or more, has you make these choices about what do you want your character to excel at, and what are your weaknesses? What are the trade-offs? Are you going to play some single-player RPG and focus on all your stealth traits and whether it's Skyrim, Fallout, whatever, or are you going to be the toe-to-toe brawler, or are you going to solve problems in different ways using ingenuity, and you're going to have strengths and weaknesses. The second that we say that only cosmetics can fall in that space, that anything that has a mechanical advantage to it needs to be something that can be changed instantly on the fly, we're saying that identity can no longer include those core RPG elements. And I understand that community has a real big part in this, and that people's fear is often driven by their firsthand experience, getting declined from pugs, getting turned down or benched by their raid leader or whatever else because of these choices or things that feel like they're out of their control. And the path forward for us right now is to try to navigate those rocks on either side and find a way to save what we see as like the beating heart of the RPG genre without giving players those terrible experiences. How nuanced can the Covenant choices be? How can the pros and cons play out such that it feels like more situational and not, okay, this is the right choice, this is the wrong choice. If we fail in that, yes, there is the ultimate fallback option of, all right, we just give up and you can swap them freely and don't worry about it. But then you're also going to be in a world where you are a Kyrian running around with these rad angel wings and a back attachment looking like, the embodiment of the Valkyr, using plague and blood and necrotic stuff because you're using Venthyr and Necrolord abilities. It's not what the system was designed around. We lose something when we do that. It's not something we want to give up, and I think it's not something that's what's best for the game in the long run. And so...
All right. This answer is amazing. Okay? You guys have heard me preach this endlessly on this channel. God bless him. God bless him. Ian, love you, man. I love you in this moment more than I've ever loved you before. Here's the other thing. God bless your naivete. Because traditionally, and against every ounce of arguing that I could piece together every time this happened internally, I always lost this battle. Always. But I'm not the game director. I was never the game director, so it was easier for me to lose the battle. But I sincerely hope he sticks to his guns on this. And I would never put money on it. So, should we start the timer right now until that moment he's dreading, where they give up and just go, okay, guys, whatever. Do what you want. You can have all the power things now, right? How long until the rewards or the swap restrictions are softened, right? Place your bets. Because historically, they've never been able to do this, right? It goes back to talent respecs. It goes back to Horde Alliance Shaman Paladin. It goes back to everything. It goes back to getting rid of weapon skills, right? But I just found a new hammer. I want to be able to swing it right away. Well, all right. Weapon skills are gone. It's historically never, right? And all that stuff is designed, right, for identity, right? I'm a fire mage that swings a sword. I know I'm a weirdo, but that's what I do. That's my... Oh, there's that guy that's a fire mage that swings a sword. What a weirdo, right? That's my identity. Oh, I got a new sword. He rolls on it. What the hell are you rolling on this sword? Because that's my identity, right? Get out of my face. Firestone Warlock, exactly. But yeah, historically, never stuck to their guns. Never. And that includes when I was there, right? I'd put up a fight on a lot of them, but I always lost. So, God bless him preaching the philosophy, but the philosophy is worth absolutely nothing if they're going to fold. So, yeah, the beating heart, the soul of the RPG indeed. Make people make choices, right? Make people live those choices, feel those choices, be proud of their choices, and maybe make a decision that isn't power based once in a while. And he's absolutely right to point out the content differences too. The important thing is not a per fight basis. It's over time. Everyone should have their moment to shine. Paladins have their moment to shine in this fight. Warlocks have their moment to shine in this fight. I mean, if you think back in like Rogues tank Gruul or Warlocks tank Twin Imps, it was Twin Imps, right? Whatever it was, like, holy cow, those are historic, amazing moments, right? That players loved. and they love being their class at that particular time. And those are super memorable moments. So thank you, Beeblebrox. Droggers, Terracar, Lucas, the Boulder, and Zuzu. Congrats. Welcome to the horde. Oh, look at that yellow submarine. It's amazing. Anyway, so, yeah, I love this answer so much, and I hope that he can stick to his guns. I have no faith that he'll be able to. I think internally, even if, like, he is the Rock, right? Let's assume for a moment that Ian is the Rock. He believes everything he's saying, and he's the person that has to be overcome. And it's a good that he's the game director, right? But he's going to get a ton of internal pressure constantly. He's going to get pressure from externally, from Reddit and every Twitch person, and, you know, like a lot of the people that aren't going to defend this system and how hard it is to switch. And that's going to bleed internally. So people are going to be in his office every day. Are we going to be able to, when are we going to change in this, right? So let's see if he can, let's lend him our strength as RPG players. And some of you are like, screw that, I want to be able to switch. I'm telling you right now, you're wrong. Stop it. Bad. It's the beating heart. You heard him say it. It's the beating heart. Don't stab us in the heart.
So we're going to fight to find a solution, but the community, I would hope, is with us in this fight. The conversation I'd love to have in the coming weeks is what are the balances that we can strike? What is a path forward that's not just, hey, Blizzard, don't ever attach power to any kind of meaningful choice? Because there is something cool about those choices. And let's try to save it before we just throw it out.
By the way, I've been doing this a long time, and he has too. I don't think there is a compromise. I think they're at odds with each other, right? The value of a choice is as much what you're gaining as what you're giving up. And so as you increase the value, you have to increase the difficulty of changing, right? As you increase the difficulty of changing, you increase the value. So those things are hand in hand. And so, yeah, the solution is, it's a tricky one.
Okay. So I guess there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of iteration and communication on this topic in the coming weeks and months, I suppose, because this will this will definitely be a continued hot topic for a while. I can just
he's already rubbing his hands like he's going to war. You know, he's loading his weapon, just like, yep. He's already trying to form arguments like, should I give Sleuth the benefit of the doubt that he bought it, or he's just like, nah, screw it, just let me change. You can tell he wasn't down with that answer yet. I get that impression, and it's hilarious. He's digging in,
pulsing from the community. But on a slightly lighter note, speaking of covenants, there was a couple of slight concerns of things like, hey, I like leveling with my buddy and I like playing with my buddy, but he wants to be, I don't know, Kyrian, and I want to be Night Fae. Can we still play together? Can we level together? Can we do...
These were the exact arguments about Horror vs. Alliance back in the day, right? And I hate to say I told you so. Is World of Warcraft better because it has two factions? Or is it worse because you can't play with your buddy who wants to play an orc and you want to play a dwarf? Right? Are the two factions good for the game, or are they bad for the game? Same exact arguments. It's hilarious.
World quests or dailies or whatever may be down the road together.
Yes, you can do basically all of those things. Covenants are going to be a different personal journey that you're taking. If there's endgame outdoor content, you might have a quest from your covenant that sends you to the same place as your buddy who has a quest from a different covenant, but you can group together, do those things, achieve common goals and rewards. As a rule, we almost never want to separate players. We always want to let you play with your friends. The only small exceptions are going to be some single-player, one-time covenant quest lines, kind of like the Glass Hall campaigns back in Legion, but that's like a tiny, tiny piece of the game.
Okay. Let's put those aside for now because I have a feeling we're going to be talking. Covenants are going to develop continuously. Obviously, they're a huge feature of the expansion, and there's probably going to be some more devs down the line and blue posts and things that are going to come out. But of all the things we've kind of talked about for the expansion, there's a few really huge systems and important kind of aspects of the game that haven't really been touched on too much. So I was hoping to kind of open the Pandora's box on that. So if we could start with itemization. Sure. We haven't really chatted about too much. It's kind of been all over the map in BFA. We went Warforged and Titan Forging. We went into Corruption. It's had its flaws. It's had its successes, which I'd be curious to hear what the team's thoughts are on that. But the idea of having RNG behind gear so that it kind of keeps you playing the game, keeps you wanting, excited for that next upgrade, which causes moments of frustration as well. But on top of it, there hasn't been really a counterbalance to this. There hasn't been, I'm just the unluckiest player in the world. I play 20 hours a day. I just can't seem to get, the maximum Titan Forge or the corruption that I want. But, little Jimmy Bob over here has managed to get what he wants in week 1. He was just that lucky. And
God, I hate little Jimmy Bob. You guys? Which one? All right. How many Jimmy Bobs in chat? Little Jimmy Bob. I hate that guy.
No matter what I do, I just can't seem to get that gear, and I want to be able to put in the hours and work hard and grind and ultimately still have the piece of gear I want. So is there any kind of RNG counterbalance coming to the game in the future for those really unlucky people?
Yes. So some of this is stuff we touched on at BlizzCon in terms of, pulling back.
First, we're restricting the name Jimmy Bob, so you can no longer make a name Jimmy Bob because F that guy. He's horrible. Yeah. Hate him.
Back trying to consolidate systems like the weekly Mythic Plus chest or PvP chest or potentially bonus rolls from raids as well into a larger wrapper that lets you, with more time investment each week, if you're the person who plays, you do more than just your one Mythic 10 or Mythic 15 for the week, you're actually chain running keys, you should get more choices at the end of the week, more chances to get the item that you want, and then you can pick out of that range of items that you have unlocked and earned which one is best for you, with some fallback options in case none of them is ideal for you. But that's just, I think, one piece of this. When we talk about systems like Warforging, Titan Forging, Corruption, there are attempts to solve a problem that we created for ourselves, I think, over the years. It's an area where, if you look back to the origins of the game, the way the game is unfolding right now in Classic, loot was a reward unto itself. It was a goal unto itself. There was randomness. Sometimes, you want that Bone Reaver's Edge, you want that Perdition's Blade. It's not going to drop. It doesn't drop for the next week, doesn't drop for the next week. But eventually you're going to get it because it's not that random. And when you get it, it is the item. You don't have to worry about, was it Warforged? Did it roll a socket? It's just the thing. It's your best in slot item. But over the years, with the addition of different difficulties, different raid sizes, we increased the number of items that we gave you time and time and time again until you got to a point where I think when we did 10 and 25 separately in a couple different expansions, but certainly in Cataclysm, by the time we got to Warlords, there were times where set piece dropping bosses would give you 7 or 8 items for a raid. And what that led to was us getting to a point where most raid groups would actually saturate on gear before they were anywhere close to done with their own experience of enjoying and learning counters.
Yeah. So he's right that there's a problem they created themselves. And what's the element that he's missing here? At the same time, he was adding loot tables, right? Meaning there were a lot of different places you could get loot from. They were also homogenizing the gear so that the gear transformed into whatever it was you needed based on the specs you picked, right? Or, the number of attributes was shrinking down to just the optimized things, right? The loot was all getting a lot more optimized / boring. we would have killed back in Classic for multiple, like a whole bunch new loot tables, right? Because then we could have, dropped items for all the weird specs that were missing a lot of their stuff. We didn't have enough loot tables, and so we had to double down on the successful specs, right? And make sure they were getting their gear so you could progress to the next raid tier when it came out. And so we literally had to abandon a bunch of the off specs because we just didn't have the loot tables. And so they tried to solve the problem on two ends, and they actually just painted themselves into a corner. And so they should. It's so funny because he's really close, right? He's really close to understanding. Again, the beating heart of the RPG, as he puts it, where choice and identity and all of these things, and you stick to it, and then he has all these loot tables to fulfill all of those identity fantasies, right? And by making loot more interesting in general, make it made by a person, right, instead of a spreadsheet. And make it so you're stuck with that thing, right? Not stuck with that thing, but you're excited to be that identity, that choice, the fire mage or the feral druid or whatever it is, and then you go chase the gear that's all over the place to fulfill that feral druid fantasy, instead of, like he was saying, saturating. Well, we only have 10 optimized pieces at this level, so once you get them all, you're done. We don't need any more than 10 loot tables. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing that's happened over time. But it's something I feel like he's close to realizing. Let's see if he gets there.
It's not about, keeping you playing chasing a carrot. It's about you're trying to overcome a challenge. And for guilds that aren't the top ones in the world, progressing through a tier can take months. But what we found time and time again was people would get to the later bosses in the raid and kill the boss for the first time, be excited about overcoming this challenge, and disenchant most of what dropped. And so that led us to, okay, well, what if we have all these extra systems like Warforged, like Thunder Forging when it first came in Mists, Warforging, Titan Forging, etc., so that even though, you're going to get the loot up front, let's give you a chance to still get excited when something crazy drops. Let's give you something that lets you feel like you're getting stronger as you farm the content. I think at this point, where our plan for Shadowlands is to take a step back and actually, and I know this sounds like a nerf, and this may be upsetting to some folks, but reduce the amount of loot that drops. We have tons more sources than we ever did before, from raids, Mythic Plus, PvP, but then at the same time, just let loot be loot. We're not planning Warforging, we're not planning Titan Forging in Shadowlands. There's no corruption, there's no system to replace corruption. We are still planning on, it can have avoidance or whatever, but that's a different sort of system. I don't think that's the thing that makes people, rumble about the current structure. And we'll see how that plays out.
That's the other thing that action RPGs bring with it that's really bad for a game like WoW, is just constantly being showered with loot, right? Every time you kill a dude, just loot everywhere. That's not good. It's spam. It's not interesting. Having to sift through and sort through 100 items to find maybe one marginal increase is not a fun process, right? You want to look at a handful of items and go, oh yeah, there's some good stuff here. Let's pass it out, It should be exciting, right? And that's one of the things that Dark Souls confirmed for me, right? Look how often you find a chest and there's a one item in it. But that item is a totally different game experience. It's a new weapon. It has a totally different item set. It could change your entire experience, right? That's the power of even just one item in 20, 30 minutes of play, right? But it's amazing. So you can do things different ways. And some people love the loot showering, right? And you have to have the item filters like they have in Path of Exile and stuff like that. But I've gotten so tired of that stuff, right? I've always been on board with the concentrated coolness, which is one of the design principles of Blizzard, or at least it used to be. if you can do a lot of mediocre stuff or a little bit of amazing stuff, always do the little bit of amazing stuff. Same principle, man. Just reduce the amount of loot you're dropping, make it amazing, make it designed by human beings, make it not optimized, like take chances, take risks, do things like build arounds, right? Like this is a common term in TCG games, Magic the Gathering, whatever. Have some that's just on the power curve, right? Here's a weapon that just kicks ass. That's what it does. Its role is to kick ass. Here's another one that does not kick very much ass, but if you combo it with this, that, and the other thing, holy cow, you're onto something. Go into the tank, the think tank, and theory craft how to get some value out of this thing. Build around it with your talents and other items. You have to have loot that crosses that whole thing. Right now, it's just all power curve. It's all really straight, mundane, optimized nonsense, right? And that's really boring. It's too one-dimensional. So get loot back to being interesting, risky, experimental, creative, and then if you have the right people creating items, you're going to find that you have a lot of loot to drop, and you have more loot tables because of the way the game's progressed, and you're going to find that they go hand in hand, and it's really exciting. And then people chase after all of those different things because they want to try stuff, and that leads them to all kinds of different places to do content. And that's the key to it, right? So bring that back.
That loot be loot. It's a crazy idea, I know.
Crazy. I have to double take on that one. So aside from just tertiary stuff, that's it. It's just a piece drops, that's the piece. Old school.
That is the current plan. God help us. We'll see how it turns out.
Just quick side note. What about...
We'll see how it turns out. You know how it turns out. Why do you have to see how it turns out? All you have to do is stick to your guns. God help us. You just have to... You have to believe in it, right? You have to believe in it, and you have to understand that some people aren't going to like it, and you have to have confidence that your retail crowd that might be single-minded, might be narrow-minded or focused or have a myopic view of how things should be done, are actually open to new experiences as well, right? Trust that they're going to enjoy it when they experience it, potentially, right? Because you're going to get a lot of the modern benefits of WoW. You're going to get brand new content, right? Which is something Classic is desperately missing, right? But with some of these old philosophies, right? And that's going to try to meet some people halfway, right? And so, yeah, believe that the audience will appreciate stuff like that, and stick to your guns.
What about JC/sockets still being a tertiary, etc.? Because sockets are, well, for DPSers especially, just worth so much eye level.
Totally. That's something we're still figuring out. I don't have a definite answer there, but I understand that, like, particularly on some slots, that's more impactful in terms of randomness than Warforging. And if we just keep, bracers or rings having a chance to get a socket, that hasn't necessarily solved the problem. But we also want jewel crafting to have a niche. We'll get there soon.
Okay. In kind of the world of items to a certain extent, this concept of just, borrowed power or just too much passive damage coming from sources. There's a lot of observation and complaint even from myself. The memes and jokes about Twilight Devastation on tanks, they come from a truthful source. Most of the damage that you do, shared between trinket procs, auto attack, corruption sources at the moment, it doesn't really feel that you have very impactful rotation and button pushing on your characters as much as, oh, I just hope this procs and I'll still, out damage most of the raid or still do some of the top damage. Is there any plan to kind of draw back and put a lot of the power back in the players' hands in terms of rotation so that, more skillful players can distinguish themselves, you can tell who has some more to learn, etc.?
Yes. Two aspects to that, I think.
Before he answers, this is another tricky one because you can over design this stuff, right? And I think what they're seeing is a consequence of over design, right? Because if you over design the rotation to deliver power, if you do all the things in the right order, right? Then all you have to do is teach the monkey to push the buttons in the right order, right? And you've done it, right? Whereas and that's an over-designed rotation. Whereas back in the day, like you can call us bad designers, right? But we just created a bunch of cool abilities and let the populace figure out what the best rotations were. Sometimes that meant Frostbolt spam, right? Unfortunately. But other times there were really complex rotations that led to amazing damage that people had to figure out. And some people, or for some specs, like it took a while, right? Like people didn't believe in certain things, and they would just say, "Yeah, that's a terrible spec. You'll never get anywhere," right? But then somebody comes along and gets to put his mark on the world because he figured out how to do the thing, right? That was special and different using this certain set of items and talents. And he's now, crazy, doing crazy damage. And so if you mathematically over design a rotation to be done in a certain way, that's the cap. That's the limit to the creativity. You've established it. And it becomes known because somebody works it out, and then everyone just starts doing that thing. So you got to be really careful not to over design rotations. Let's see what he says.
One is just tuning. I think we've always had these passive damage trinkets, procs, talents, etc. I think a big mistake that we made in Corruption was just straight up the tuning. I don't think that's a secret. We missed the mark pretty severely on some of those early on. But because of the nature of items and how people chase items, spend on BOEs, disenchant, or cleanse one item versus another, we didn't want to upset the overall hierarchy of the corrupted items. And so we kept Twilight Dev clearly being the best dungeon corruption, Infinite Stars clearly being the best one for single target bosses. But really, those passive options, philosophically, shouldn't be the ones that sim the best. They should be the middle of the road option. Where if you're someone who, if you're not playing your rotation optimally, if you don't want to worry about a lot of things, you can just put it on, use it, count on it doing a bunch of damage. But if they sim the best, if for the best players in the cutting edge guilds, in top tiers of PvP, etc., those are the best answer, well then all of the stat modifiers, all the other ones that do rely on your performance, are actually for most players just going to be useless. And we just missed the mark on the tuning there. That's not something that we want to carry forward. Now I'm trying to remember the other piece of this is just randomness with procs. And the way, so that's something that we're evaluating how that plays out and what our philosophies are with so-called real procs per minute, or the way procs per minute trinkets or talents and so forth work. Ultimately, your variation in performance from pull to pull should largely depend on your own execution and your skill. And of course, there's going to be some randomness in terms of some procs, but also, did you get targeted by the boss mechanic at the worst time? You just pop all your cooldowns, and then you had to go run out and drop the thing. But right now, things like how quickly or how many times did Infinite Stars proc, or how much Vision of Perfection uptime you get, are the things that determine your success or failure in your own personal competition with yourself. And that's kind of frustrating, right? It's disempowering. It makes you feel like, why bother trying to min-max? Why bother trying to squeeze out an extra little percent of performance if you're going to lose to somebody who just got lucky with procs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's good that I think we're running a bit back on that because, we've all seen the Havoc Demon Hunter parses with 78% of Infinite Stars damage coming in, so that's nice to hear. we've talked about it a couple, or we've mentioned it as examples a few times. But another thing we haven't touched too much.
Just to address the answer there, it was pretty good. Obviously, there's a lot of tuning that goes into it, and he's right that passives should be sort of mid-range, and the skill-based stuff should be, if you're bad, it should do worse than passives, and if you're good, it should do better than passives. And it does seem like the corruption stuff in general, and this is one of the flaws of that kind of system with the bonus penalties, is the expectation of the bonuses are higher because you're being hamstrung by some penalty, but you can usually end up mitigating the penalties or disregarding the penalties, and so you end up getting a surge of power that's beyond the normal scope. And then when it's tied to things like procs, then there's an RNG element there that makes the corrupted stuff really swingy. So that was always going to happen, right, with that kind of design.
Much on is the world of M+ and dungeon affixes, etc. I'm gonna kind of preamble this real quickly by saying in general, or commenting in general, and this I guess lends itself to class changes as well. Sometimes it takes a very long time to change something that is very obvious. I know there's a plethora of sometimes, bugs. Maybe you can't recreate an issue. But even things like class balance. The example I like to use often is, how overpowered Warrior Thunderclap was. And it was kind of left out of the way for several months. Issues with dungeon tuning, etc. Where, it's kind of disheartening for some people that they have to wait major patch to even have the chance to get looked at that kind of stuff. Is there going to be maybe an effort going forward in the future, or something you take a look at where you guys visit balance and numbers tuning a bit more frequently, so that talent rows or talent choices aren't just kind of left to simmer for an entire expansion?
So, yeah.
Yes, we're going to make everything do 3 damage and have 3 life, and therefore no one will ever complain because everything will be perfectly balanced. No, but honestly, this is a consequence of taking risks, of making up interesting, creative things. There's always going to be good stuff, and there's always going to be bad stuff. But what you don't really want the meta to be really volatile, right? That's also a pretty bad end, right? So you don't want everything to be totally static and boring and perfectly balanced. But you also don't want the meta, which is what he's asking for. He's asking for basically the meta to just be, they're constantly changing things every week, and it's like everyone's got to go back to simming and back to the drawing table and the theory crafting table every week to figure out what the new hotness is. It's too much too fast. So it's okay that the form. I use a lot of TCG references. I realize, but it's okay that the format takes some time to solve and then is solved for a little bit before moving on to the next format, right? You don't want to change things too quickly.
Yes, that's always a goal. And it's silly for me. I would never say that that's not something that should be done or that we should care about. I think the challenge for us at times in the past has been priorities. So using the Warrior Thunderclap case as an example in particular, I think there were a few different facets there. One piece is, when it comes to emergent playstyles, not things that are just straight up bugs, we want to let things the players figure out that are novel, that we didn't necessarily plan on or intend, breathe. We want to see where they go. We want to let folks who have been clever and creative reap the benefits of that creativity. We'd look at like Glimmer as a Holy Paladin playstyle and how that emerged. Sometimes these are things that actually are kind of cool. Now, of course, if they're ridiculously overpowered, then that's a different problem. Or if they lead you down a frustrating play style that's not enjoyable, that's a problem. But it takes a little bit of time for us to figure out whether something's going to go one down one path or the other. Like in retrospect, it can obviously seem super simple and clear. Like, oh yeah, obviously this was super degenerate. Why didn't you fix it right away? But at the time, a lot of things feel like they might be bad initially, then end up being fine. Also, I think Glimmer, as I recall, Thunderclap issue was largely facilitated.
I like this answer, yeah. Don't be too reactive, because people, of course, are screaming and raging as soon as they find something that's a little bit more powerful than everything else. But that's just because before the format gets solved, while everyone's still working out all the intricacies of everything, there's just a lot of chaos associated with what's going on. And so give it some time to settle out. Give it some time for people to have missed things, to be wrong about certain things.
Facilitated by Azerite traits, and that's an area where, as opposed to talent choices or a rotational quirk, we tend to want to be more conservative with balance changes because we know people have made investments in items and made choices that aren't easy to quickly, change up or revoke or walk back on if we nerf the playstyle out from under you. But the real answer, and at the core of it, live game was, and live balance was during that period of time, not a high priority for the systems team. We were kind of all hands on deck, trying to fix Azerite, trying to get essences up and running, ready for the 8.2 PTR. And that was just digging out of a hole that we made for ourselves. Right? And part of what will let us not do that in the future is having a more successful alpha and beta, working with you and the community and everybody to solve these problems sooner.
Oh no, they're relying on it. The community, look out. True, for example, some mage talents, especially for the mage, are dead since Legion. Yeah, and those are the ones I care more about. The ones that no one's picking are the ones that I tend to care more about than, the Thunderclap example in this one. Because I also believe that you should let people feel reasonably overpowered for a time. Like, let them have their power moments, because it's going to be some other class with some other ability down the road, right? And it's going to rotate through, hopefully. Everyone gets their day in the sun, so it's kind of cool to feel powerful for a little bit. And by the way, it's not all, it's not all good. Sometimes when you're the powerful dude, you get accused of being flavor of the month, you get criticized for only winning a fight because you are overpowered, there's a lot of hate that gets shown your way, even though you've been a warrior your whole life. You've been throwing Thunderclap your whole life. It just happens this patch, it's overpowered, right? You haven't done anything differently. So, yeah, let it breathe a little bit. It's okay.
So that going forward, we have more bandwidth to pay attention to the live game, and not, oh crap, we have to get these big fixes in for patches, and not spend as much time looking at logs and feedback and talent usage metrics on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So
That's
I mentioned
true also,
dungeons as
Terriger.
well in there, and just in general, I'll just free floor whatever you want. I know, maybe Morgan might be more hands-on this, but just in general, the philosophy of Mythic Plus was probably one of the most successful systems that was ever implemented in Legion. Huge replayability, a lot of fun. And then, although there were some developments in BFA of it, there wasn't really too much, right? I mean, the seasonal affix was great. It was nice, a couple of achievements here and there associated, but, no new affix changes, just kind of rebalancing. No new affixes, period. No kind of, Kiss Curse affix that was, mentioned a few times as a potential that never saw light either. Are there any plans to in any way revamp, redo any Mythic Plus affixes? Tyrannical Fortified, are they going away? Are we seeing new affixes? That kind of territory, that kind of realm.
So I don't have anything specific to announce right now. I think big picture philosophy, we're happy with the structure of Mythic Plus. Like, I agree, it's been a really fun system. It's been great to see dungeons added as kind of this third pillar of WoW endgame gameplay alongside raids and PvP. It doesn't mean we're not going to iterate on specific affixes. I think we're happy with how seasonal affixes turned out and want to continue going down that road, coming up with new ones. There may be some tuning to specific stuff there, but we don't want to make change for the sake of change. We're not looking at a system and seeing tons of problems that make us want to blow it up, put it back together in a different way. The idea of Kiss Curse is something we do want to chase. I think the Awakened affix this season is a fun example of that. Like, technically, there's extra challenging bosses that you have to deal with. You can't just ignore the affix and complete the dungeon, but clearly it's also unlocking new routing and giving you lots of advantages that you can play with if you do it right.
Cool. And in that same vein, or in the vein of Mythic Plus, is there any plan to add further into incentivization for some players? I mean, some people just obviously like to challenge themselves, get that Raider IO score, push keys, whatever it may be. But, more often than not, you hear a lot of people going, what are the affixes this week? Oh, bolstering? Never mind. I'll see you next week, And there's not really a lot of, people just don't want to do it. There's no reason to do it, especially now that, Warforging and Titan Forging and Corruption are gone. So, there's no mini pets, no vanity rewards associated with it. So any plans to kind of try to get those players back in the loop?
Yes, on a couple of fronts. I think we want to move towards and we've started to do this in this current patch in BFA, ahead of the curve, cutting edge type structure for deeper participation and achievement, doing all the dungeons, completing it thoroughly as opposed to just casually engaging with the system. I think our loot plans, where you get increasing chances of the good loot that you want by doing multiple runs in a week of a certain quality, will reward people who want to engage more deeply, but also give people reason to do more than just the Sunday night, Monday night, quick one run for the week to get their chest. At the same time, we also want to strike a balance where people for whom that's not their favorite content don't feel pressured to do tons and tons of something that they don't enjoy as much as they do PvP or raiding or what have you. So we don't want to take that too far out.
Okay. Kind of combining the world of, we just talked about itemization, let loot be loot, and one of the main reasons one of the main incentives that people do run Mythic Plus is to, kind of try to get that Warforged, Titan Forge, Corruption, whatever it may be. But that will be going away, right? I mean, if they get that piece of dungeon gear in that dungeon, they're done. That's it. The only thing they can maybe get is whatever you might do with tertiary stats and sockets. So why rerun that dungeon out of just pleasure of running it or trying to rank?
I mean, I think that's something that we need to figure out. But I think the key thing for rerunning it is if by doing more Mythic Plus in the week, you're improving your chances at more options for the higher tier loot from your weekly chest that you can choose among, without randomness or Warforging or Titan Forging, that's a reason. And we're not. It'll depend on the individual players and play styles. And I think it's fine if you just want to do one or two a week. Again, we don't.
No, weekly chests. Just let me loot something. I hate delayed rewards when it comes to I killed a dragon. What do I get? I don't know. I'm going to kill him 20 more times and then I'll up my chances of getting something good. I like killing a dragon and looting it and getting an item. Am I too old?
I don't want to make people feel obligated to do tons. We know there are going to be people who just like pushing keys for the sake of pushing keys, of getting their IO score up, of climbing the leaderboards, or just generally the fun of the gameplay. But I think that's going to happen regardless.
Okay. Switching gears here, one of the main features we haven't talked about, which is actually I'm extremely excited for, Torghast. Now I know.
By the way, before he gets on to Torghast, it's not as simple as he's trying to narrow it down to you only have one equipment slot, and once you run a dungeon, you get that one equipment slot with the best in slot, then you're done with the game, right? Obviously, it's more complex than that because you have a lot of slots and you have a lot of different potential. Well, let's hope. You have a lot of different builds. You have a lot of different specs. After they changed the Covenant thing where you can swap it on the fly all the time, you got different Covenant combos you want to do. So there's a lot of loot potentially, right, to want to get. So, and that's always been the way, right? And then beyond that, you might want to help your friends, right? You might have an obligation to your guild, right, to get them through it and get all their pieces decked out. So
you don't have all the details for you guys. Probably just don't have all the details period in Torghast. But I was hoping to pick your brain just conceptually on how you guys are approaching Torghast with things like, Horrific Visions were quite well received by a lot of people, but a lot of the frustration was, hey, Watcher and dev team, we want to keep running this. We want to keep practicing. We want to keep having fun. We want to kind of push ourselves. Is Torghast planned to be a limited per day, per week thing? Or if you want to keep going in there without player power rewards, because I assume those will be capped in some way. If you want to just keep going in there and getting better and better at it, and pushing some floors and what have you, can you do that?
That's something we're going to continue to dial in over the course of alpha. Obviously, first off, we need to get the feature out in your hands, which we're hoping to do within the next couple of weeks, at least a first look at it, and then we'll build upon that. Our current thinking is that there will be some limit on the runs, a pretty permissive one. The goal isn't to make this feel like, all right, this is your one Ritter training run for the few days. But the flip side of something that's infinitely spammable, even if you can't do it for rewards past a certain point, or if you're only choosing when it's for rewards, is that I think that leads you down a play style where you feel like you should practice and practice and practice with no reward, so that you don't waste the ones that you do have or the ones that count. But we'll see. I think it's ultimately, this is a more replayable, infinitely more varied system than Horrific Visions, and so that lends itself to many more runs. But I think there is probably going to be some value in striking a balance. We want to have a lot more open-ended way, is our current thinking anyway, to earn more keys. So if you're someone who just plays more WoW each week, you can do more Torghast runs naturally, not in this hard diminishing returns way like Visions were. But I think we're empowered to make the rewards more meaningful when we know that you can't just spam it for 20 hours straight.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of rewards, what kind of rewards do you guys have an idea of what you want to tie to this? I know we mentioned things like crafting reagents for legendaries, but are you going to be tying any vanity rewards, titles, achievements, obviously, to this kind of thing, or is it just strictly for legendary crafting, however that may turn out, and that's kind of it?
I would say definitely all of those things, right? Mm-hmm. Different cosmetics and prestige unlocks. There are going to be some story beats that lead you through Torghast. There's some sections of Torghast that are currently planned to be more modular, less infinitely variable, but more just benchmarks and places where souls of particular importance or relevance to our story may be trapped. By freeing them, you'll push the story forward and unlock some extra abilities within your Covenant. Beyond that, we'll see. Yeah, legendaries and crafting legendaries are going to be the prime unique reward for Torghast. And first and foremost, we want to get the system fully stood up and then layer on rewards after that as it makes sense.
Do you have any extra info to share on the kind of legendaries? Well, not what they'll do, but how legendaries are going to play out, how many you're thinking we can equip, how quickly we're expected to obtain these legendaries, etc.
A lot of that's going to be tuning that we dial in just over the course of alpha and beta. Initial thinking for legendaries is that they're craftable. You will unlock the recipes from a wide variety of sources, both within Torghast, within the Maw, and other parts of the Shadowlands and the game world. A bit like essences in that sense. Unlike essences initially, current thinking is that these unlocks will largely be account-wide, so that when you learn the recipe, you don't have to worry about running the recipe again on different characters. But then by running Torghast and interacting with our profession systems, you can get a base template item crafted by a blacksmith that's a pair of gloves that you can then infuse with energy in this forge that you'll find in Torghast to make it into one of the legendaries that you've unlocked. And for the legendaries themselves, we're actually currently thinking, this is kind of leaning into the fantasy of the power of the Maw, and this is, the dude who's crafting these for you is the one who made, once upon a time, Frostmourne, the one who made the Lich King's Helm. He has access to all of these ancient scraps of knowledge and power, and maybe the fantasy is that these are actually the origins of some of the Legion legendaries.
No, put it in the players' hands. The players are the important bit. Not the guy. I don't care who made Frostmourne. I want to make the new Frostmourne.
Of some of the 2-piece and 4-piece set bonuses that we've had over the course of the last dozen years. And so things like those may be also finding their way back into the legendary system, so you can earn the ability to put those bonuses that you may remember fondly or not on one of these items.
Yeah, so obviously as long as the player is ultimately the guy who makes the thing or improves the thing or does all the important parts of that, learning from an NPC or as part of the quest, go talk to the guy and then he'll teach you, you know. That's all good. As long as you're the guy that sits at the smithy and makes the thing, that's what's important. So I shouldn't write off it as saying you're going to go to the guy and he's going to hand you a new legendary because he made it.
Oh, interesting. And I guess since Torghast is meant to kind of be, I don't know how far ahead you've thought of this, but hopefully far enough. What's the kind of plan for Torghast, you know, moving forward through the expansion? Like, how are you going to keep it relevant moving forward through 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, etc.?
We'll have a lot more, to be clear, we'll have a lot more to talk about with Torghast, and Mr. Paul Cubitt is probably going to be the best designer who's kind of overseeing the feature to go into the details there. But the nature of Torghast...
Shout out to Paul. Wait, he's the guy who's doing Torghast? I have serious reservations about Torghast, by the way.
Allows for expansion in terms of new environments, new creatures to face, new powers to unlock, as well as, of course, new rewards. When it comes to things like leaderboards, we're not currently planning on going out with them, though there'll be the same set of achievements and things that will, I'm sure, allow folks in the community to track that. We want to let the scene evolve a little bit, and then we want to fully support the direction that it evolves in.
Yeah, just to address a couple of your comments about the crafting thing. The Paladin Hammer Quest was really cool, and NPC crafts that for you, but that's lower level, so we're talking about like the high-end legendaries, the most powerful thing, like the Sulfuras builds and the Thunder Fury builds. I think those should be crafted by players. To respond to yours, Control Delete, I think most people should feel like you, and that they're not the Mastersmith, and neither is your character. But there is a small percentage who want to be that thing, and that's their mark on the world. That's the guy who makes Thunder Furies. That's the guy who makes, you know, Hand of Ragnaros. Because he spent his time getting to that point. Then it becomes a social thing. It becomes a niche that people that love crafting can aspire to. And I think that's amazing. And so you go to that guy who is a Mastersmith and his character's a Mastersmith, right? Or mostly his character in that case. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. For every person to be doing it, I also think it's bad. Like, every person makes their own sword is weird. Especially since one of the contracts of the crafting system is that you can only do a couple of things. And one of those things is usually gathering components. So you're really only capable of doing the one thing. And a lot of times you can't do, you know, the things that you want, right? You have to reach out to others and collaborate with others and get other people to make you things and you make them things, you know. So that's if you're even interested in crafting at all. Then there's also just, there should be room for you not to have to be a crafter. If that's not your thing, you don't want to be the guy who sits in town and does that, you don't have to. You can always be the guy that just benefits from their work, and you go out and make a bunch of money so you can pay him to do the stuff. So yeah, that's to give you a more complete opinion on my philosophy of how that stuff should piece together
through leaderboard support or what have you. We don't want to necessarily put it in a box before we know how the community is going to enjoy it and push it down one path or another.
Okay. All right, so I'll let that one simmer because, as you mentioned, Paul will probably have some info in the coming days for us.
Paul,
I want to mention real quick, because I know we're kind of running short on time here.
Paul is.
You mentioned World Quest 2.0 at BlizzCon.
Or do
I haven't really seen too much info on it. Maybe I haven't looked in the right places, but do you have any info to share on how the daily or World Quest or whatever new structure that's coming is going to pan out?
Dailies.
A bit. Again, this is one of those later in alpha things as the level cap goes up and we get to max level. But World Quest...
We're going to remove them. Yeah, they're terrible content, and they're the lowest common denominator, and they're filler, and yeah, we decided that they're not good, so we're going to get rid of them.
Still going to be a thing. We're not currently planning to have emissaries the way we have for the last couple of expansions. There won't be that UI element in the corner of your screen that's telling you to go do 4 world quests from a specific area. We're going to replace those with something that we're calling callings from your covenant. And at the end of the day, part of what we've seen in places like Nazjatar, Bakugan, have been experiments with remixing the way that we can present WoW content. Because when it comes down to it, it's WoW. You're going to be hitting things with your sword, casting spells at things, killing things, clicking on things, looting things. That's the way you interact with the world. That's the core of outdoor gameplay. But you want to have...
Don't reduce it, man. Just don't. Don't do it. This is one of the problems. You're reducing World of Warcraft, one of the greatest games ever made, to its component parts that you think make up the entirety of the experience. No. It should be more than that. It shouldn't be every other game out there. This is World of Warcraft. Where's the ambition? Where's the big dream? Where's the vision? Give it to me.
Have a little bit more flexibility and structure to it beyond the just do 3 world quests, do 4 world quests that we've seen in the past. So world quests are there, but remixed, a bit reimagined, and we'll have more to talk about in the next few weeks.
Cool. One more question here in terms of crossover between PvE and PvP and needing to do the one you don't want to do in order to maximize your gains, get a nice piece of gear. PvP players needing to do their Mythic Plus for the week to get that piece. PvEers needing to get a certain rank or PvP or arena just to make sure they get that chest reward in order to fuel PvE. Are we still going to have this kind of crisscross between the two worlds, or are you planning on separating them at all?
I think having them feed into the same shared chest where you can do the one that you prefer to get more options or pulls from those tables should reduce some of the pressure that people have to do both sides of the game if they don't enjoy that personally. At the same time, we do think that some amount of crossover there is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That someone who can excel in all areas of the game should have slight advantages over someone who specializes in one area of the game. Okay. And that's not to say, I think that can clearly go too far.
That went a different direction. I was going to say some crossover there is good because it varies your experience. If you believe there's only one way there's the best way to do the thing that you want, which is to do this one thing over and over and over and over and over, that's going to exhaust and destroy you, right? But encouraging you to go and do a lot of different types of things, in pursuit of all of your goals is very healthy. But it's an encouragement. It's that delicate balance between encourage and forcing, right? And a lot of people feel forced to do stuff. And so you have to strike a balance, as in all things.
If in order to succeed at the highest levels of PvP, you need a whole bunch of raid trinkets, you need stuff from Mythic Plus, and not that much PvP gear, well, then we're balancing the game wrong. There's landing the itemization structure wrong. Okay. But if someone who does all things, I look at, someone like, random example, Roger in Method, who got, I think he was the first or one of the very first to get all rank 4 essences. Like, that's really friggin' impressive. And if you can play the game at that level in raiding, in dungeons, in PvP, you should have some advantage over someone who's just a raid specialist, or just an arena specialist. Mm-hmm. The question is just how large is that advantage, and it should be slight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so final question here, because I know you got to go.
It's always about advantage.
In order to kind of tear down the wall between the two communities, so to speak, I'm curious if the relative pretty high success of the Classic launch, and obviously there's some talks of BC loosely, but some of the more successful things in Classic, did you guys take any note from the successes of that Classic game and fuel any of those ideas going forward into Shadowlands or perhaps even further for retail?
This question strikes me as hasn't been listening, because Ian has. I've actually been impressed with how much Ian has demonstrated some of the higher points of what makes Classic special and different than retail, and some of the good elements, right? Now, having said that, I'm really dissatisfied in how all of this is just based around systems and game and the element of game. And as I preach all the time in on my channel, there's three pillars, right, to MMO design. One pillar is game, and that's all that they've talked about. And I don't necessarily blame Ian for this, because he could only field the questions that are given to him, and this guy's focused on the game element. But the other two elements are a sense of world and a social environment. And yeah, there's just I'm sad to say that there's no, so far, and we're almost done here. Not a single question has been asked, and no discussion has really been made about or been talked about the sense of world or the social environment. And these things are suffering in WoW, the social aspect most of all. So yeah, really disheartening. Ian spends a lot of time looking at the high-end players to know off the top of the head. Yeah, exactly.
Head.
Target caps and AoE, clearly.
Uh-oh.
Zing.
Are the stream shutting down?
No, I think
I like
one of
it.
the biggest takeaways is the social aspect, right? We're not going to lift some specific system from Classic, but I think one of the things we ask ourselves on a regular basis is, what can we do to make WoW a place with stronger community, a place where you can make friends the way that people commonly did and the way they still are today in Classic. I think cross-server gameplay and the pre-made group finder and all of those things have increased accessibility and made it easier than ever before to find people to do content with. But the biggest inspiration and reminder, I think, is a challenge to us to try to return to the social roots and that potential that World of Warcraft has.
Okay. Cool.
Slow clap indeed. Oh my god, you just made my dream come true. What does that mean, though? What does that mean? Let's look at how bored Sloot is. He's like, yeah, people, whatever. I got my friends. I don't need friends. They disappoint me. Oh, he addressed it. That's great.
Alright, Ian, I know you got to go. I think you have another meeting. I want to thank you again a lot for taking the time to tune in and hang out, especially from
absolutely.
the comforts of your home. Josh, thanks a lot for helping facilitate this. And,
Josh!
I'm sure I will, and we all will, downpour you with a ton of alpha feedback now that we're live and running.
What are you wearing,
I
Josh?
can't wait. It's been a pleasure as always.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Right. Take care, man. Talk to you later.
Later.
We did it. We did it. I can't believe it. I'm floored. I am legitimately floored that they talked about social, that he brought up social at the end there. Now I want to see him take an interview with somebody who cares about social aspects. But I don't think that'll happen. It's so difficult to find on, prominent members of Twitch. And honestly, I believe that Ian needs help in this respect, right? Like, Ian needs to complement his ability base, which is very focused on extreme, raiding and the power creeping and the grinding for item levels and the Raider IO scores. Like, that's his bag of tricks, right? That's what he knows. That's where he can lend his experience, and he can do a good job. Like, I've heard a lot of good things about Mythic Plus, right? But he needs a social expert. He needs a sense of world expert, or he has them and he's not listening enough to them or giving those people enough time to do their thing, right? So yeah, it's like he needs help. He needs help with that. I should interview him? Yeah, he won't take that interview. Like, imagine if someone like Asmongold were to design the social structure of the game. Yeah, that's Faralina in a nutshell, right? It's a little rough around the edges. Disconnected. No. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm going to close the YouTube video here. Thanks for watching part 2. Sorry, this one was a little bit longer, but we did pretty good. This was an hour-long interview, and we got it done in about 2 hours, just a little over 2 hours. That's impressive. I expected at least 3, so congrats me. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you appreciate it. If you have comments or you want to disagree with me, especially, please leave the comments and disagreements below, and come check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/KevinJordan, and I will see you guys later.